Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another one of our Volie Sessions. Today, I have Gregory Ashe, founder and CTO at M1 Data and Analytics, inventor of website visitor de-anonymization. I knew I was going to have a hard time with that word. Product Smart Pixel, and creator of his newest product, Traffic Alert. Greg founded M1 Data in the fall of 2007. M1 Data was founded on the principles of consumer data compilation practices that would create more robust and actionable double opt-in data sets. Greg, fun fact, is also a former world champion drag racer.
I am.
So, Greg, how's it going today?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
Awesome. And before we dive into everything that we're going to be talking about in terms of the dealerships and customer defection and all that, talk a little bit about, I'm sure people get a kick out of it. Talk about your drag racing. Well, what the heck happened there?
Hobby turned business, I guess. It was just a hobby for me for a long time. Then decided to make a run at a world championship and got lucky, and did it on the first try. So it was fun while I did it. Very time consuming. Learned a lot of stuff. And learned a lot of stuff not to do, I guess is the better way to put it. But that was 10 years ago, believe it or not. Makes me kind of feel a little old talking about it.
Well, then let's go ahead and move on. Don't want to make you feel too bad about yourself, though that is a pretty fun fact there. So one other thing, everyone, this isn't meant to be a sales call, and it's not. As you know, we do these Volie sessions. We want to share some some interesting information that will help you all in the dealerships. But this is pretty unique. Greg wants you all to think about managing customer defection. So we're going to talk a little more about what his specific product does than we typically do on these types of things, just because it is pretty unique. But Scott and I, when we were planning this, we thought it was pretty interesting and wanted to share it with you all. So with that said, let's dive into it. And Greg, first off, what need in the market were you trying to solve when you developed this?
Defection, I guess, is the easiest way to kind of say it. I mean, currently dealers spend, tens of thousands of dollars a month in marketing dollars in order to drive customers into their store. And then continue to spend money, trying to service that vehicle, maintain that customer, so that they can continue to monetize on that consumer, through service, and as well as building, an affinity to that dealer's brand, outside of the make brand that they sell, so that person becomes a reoccurring customer. So that person spreads, word of mouth advertising, gets additional people in the family, the household, or even the neighborhood to come in and buy a car from them. So with all that money spent, I think we can all agree from a business perspective that it's a lot easier to maintain someone that you've already brought into your brand to be a customer that comes back time and time again than it is to go out and find a new customer. We as a company sit on some very robust technology, and this was a product that during a brainstorming session that happened, while everybody was at home working remotely during the COVID times. So and the need in the automotive space, even more so to purchase vehicles that were coming through the service base so that dealers could have inventory, just kind of exploded the additional need that we felt this product would serve.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to touch on, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here, because everyone listening may already have their own idea of what we mean by this, but can you define what you mean by defection?
So defection is someone that exists within the dealer's DMS that is either, going to a competing dealer to acquire a vehicle, whether it be for themselves or within the household, and or, going to a competing dealer for service, or an independent repair facility for that matter. Could even go as far as saying, your dealership has a collision center. Someone within your DMS gets into a car accident and ends up at a at an independent repair shop. It's a regular, run-of-the-mill body shop, and that's collision business that you would have lost on. So it's anyone that you have an existing business relationship that exists within your DMS that is going to a facility in which competes with your business.
Mm-hmm. So with that said, you mentioned the differences between what becomes a service defector and a sales defector. How do you know when a service defector or a sales defector, and how do you know when a service defector becomes a sales defector?
Okay. So a lot of this piggybacks on our location IQ technology. I'm going to try and explain this in the most simplest terms possible. So we have what is called a lightweight location SDK. And that's a really fancy way of saying when you download a mobile application and it asks if you want to share location services for an enhanced experience with the mobile app, those mobile apps come to a third party like ours for those location services. So we process location services for probably right about 19,000 different mobile apps today. And to give you an idea on the depth of it, we process 44 billion movement records of mobile devices a day just in the United States. So when we process those location services, we're understanding where these individuals are, and there's certain businesses, or how we refer to them as points of interest, that we monitor. Now, since we're talking automotive here, we monitor every new car dealer, every used car dealer, every independent repair facility, body shop, glass repair, parts store, Pep Boys, Advanced Auto, things of that nature. And we look at that foot traffic, and we also look to see, based on what we do as a data company, how does that interact with, the other things that we do, and does it bring enhancements or life to them? And that's pretty much where Traffic Alerts was built, as we would be able to take a database in, and we specifically want to do this, with a dealer's DMS. We can, also a dealer CRM as well, any first party data that the dealer owns, and be able to indicate to that dealer, when, where, or how often an individual may be defecting to someone that is a competitor to them.
Mm-hmm. So to kind of wrap some follow-up questions into one here,
Okay.
You said where, when, and how often. What can you share on that?
So we allow a dealer to do what we refer to as an onboarding look back, which allows them to look back as far as 18 months when they're onboarding their DMS or their CRM data. And that 18 months from a service perspective would give you some cyclical behaviors, so to speak, just due to the length of time. Traditionally, most advertising agencies just queue up some type of 6-month interval in order to market for service, predicated on the last service visit or some other KPI metric in the data that they're able to gather. I think we all believe, while that may be the median or the norm, or that's what we believe, trying to time that in a correct fashion where you're fast enough to be in front of that consumer, but not too early to the point of where they would get that advertisement and forget about it, 3 to 4 weeks later when it actually is time to service. So having better timed service offers, it also lends a hand into where they're defecting to. If they're defecting to a competing dealer, and it's same brand, is it out of convenience? Is it something that happened at the dealership that made that consumer uncomfortable? If they're defecting to an independent repair facility, do they believe it's cheaper? Is it more convenient? How far is that independent repair facility from your dealer? Are you closer to, is the dealership closer to their home and they'd rather service while they're at work? And a bunch of other things and metrics that you can look at so that you can better time and or send what I would refer to as a better next best message to that consumer in order to bring them back into the dealer so that you can reignite that relationship.
So what kind of insights do you have to share in terms of, urban versus rural when it comes to defection? You know, what do you typically see in regards to where customers are defecting?
So if you want to compare urban versus rural, it kind of goes into my last statement where it's a matter of convenience on where that consumer prefers to service their vehicle in comparison to their household and what becomes more convenient for them. So what we see a lot of the times with the defection to independent repair facilities is it's generally centrally located to their work or their employment, so to speak. So it may just be convenience that they're able to drop that vehicle off and catch a quick Uber that's only $5 or $10, and or it could potentially even be walking distance to their employment. You know, there we would recommend, if there's a potential, if that dealership has a rental car facility on prem and or has the ability for a high number of loaner vehicles that they can loan out, possibly even driver service to drop them off to and from work. These are small little things that we've seen some of the dealerships execute on these programs, utilizing that data in order to bring those consumers back into their dealership versus where they're currently servicing, or I should say where they have been currently servicing prior to defection. So knowing where someone is defecting to allows you to paint a better picture of what offer you may need to put in front of them in order to get them back into your dealer. Further insights: do you need a lost leader offer? One of the things that we have found with a couple of the dealers on where we saw them, defecting to what I would refer to as lube type facilities, a Jiffy Lube or a Quick Lube, a Take 5 or things of that nature, is they just have this false premise that the oil change is half the price of what it is if they go to the dealer. The reality is that, it's probably only a few dollars difference. And we could get into, building an argument that the consumer needs to be educated on why they should put, we'll just use Toyota, for example, why, Toyota goes out and specs out specific lubricants in order to put in their vehicle. And there's a reason why you should use those because, they're better for engine life, so on and so forth. So maybe it's just messaging to re-educate the consumer on why it's better to use, products that have been vetted by Toyota when servicing their Toyota vehicle.
Mm-hmm. What stats and insights do you have in regards to people defecting to a Jiffy Lube, for example, versus another franchise dealer?
I would tell you that more are going to defect to independent repair facilities. And that's, I would say, skewed or weighted just because there's a lot more independent repair facilities than there are like brand competing dealers within a PMA. COVID does throw that off quite a bit just because of inventory and supply chain issues. Consumers went quite a bit out of their way to acquire certain pieces of inventory if they were stuck and not willing to settle for something else. So obviously that, takes the traditional, PMA and makes it significantly larger when you talk about those issues. So some of that even comes into play. But if you know that someone is well outside of your PMA and exists in your DMS, well, then there's a business and marketing decision that needs to be made. Do we spend marketing dollars advertising to those individuals? And that's another thing that Traffic Alert helps you do, is it helps you better define where you're going to spend those ad dollars. And right now, dealerships just kind of do it in a somewhat blind sense. It also allows them to see, how the timing is, when was the last time they marketed to that individual, or when was the last time their BDC contacted that individual? How does that align or narrate with when they defected? Did you contact, were you completely off in your plan to market to that individual based on timing?
Mm-hmm. And let's back up a little bit here, because one thing that I want to make sure we touch on is service defectors and potentially becoming a sales defector.
Yep.
Like you said before, this is someone who could be going to a Jiffy Lube, or they could be going to a competing Toyota dealer, or but usually, like you said, they're going to an independent shop there for their service. What do you see on the sales side for that lost customer?
It's a little all over the place. I think geo still plays somewhat of a role in that. I also believe that dealers that are still experiencing supply chain issues kind of fall into that. We see it a little bit, specifically, we saw it in a Chevrolet store where that Chevrolet's inventory, the way it was coming in. So, 1 month they would get a whole bunch of 1500s in, and then the next month they would get a bunch of sedans in, but they weren't ever getting a mix of everything, so to speak. So those things are still going to kind of, I guess, be your edge cases or be on the outside. But if we looked at a standard, let's say 100 unit, 150 unit store, I would tell you that on a given 30 days, if we were to just segment out any random 30 days, you would probably see roughly 10 to 12% service defection. You probably see somewhere around 2 to 3% sales defection.
Mm-hmm. And so what do you typically do, or in your experience, recommend to try to get those service customers back in?
So what I would say is, let's look at 18 months of historical. So with 18 months of historical, we're going to catch anywhere from 2 to 4 services that happened on that vehicle, maybe a little bit more on some edge cases. But that's going to allow us to determine how often the individual is servicing the vehicle. We can make some inferred decisions there as well, based on the last recorded mileage that the dealer has in the DMS from the last RO. And just how, where were they? Were they at a Jiffy Lube? Okay, well, then it's probably just an oil change. Okay. Now, if they're going to somewhere, else that is, maybe it's a tire shop. Maybe they went to a collision center and then ended up at a Meineke. There's a whole bunch of different nuances in it, but that historical data gives us, a much better picture of timing to market to that individual. Is it 6 months? Is Mary, servicing 8 months, 11 months? Is she servicing every 4.5 months? And allowing them to get on the right cycle. Again, as I mentioned, also, where are they going? What message do we need to deliver to, quote unquote, Mary, to say, hey, this is why you should service at this Toyota versus a Jiffy Lube.
Mm-hmm.
This is, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, finish your thought.
So, it allows better timing, and I think it allows better messaging on, what better way to communicate. And again, there's a lot of dealers out there that have their own internal BDC centers, or they use a third-party BDC center, or a third-party, call center solution, just like Volie, where that can queue up a phone call, and maybe it's a customer satisfaction survey, and there's so many different directions you can go, and the product is meant to be the business and market intelligence so that the dealer can act better on reigniting the relationship with that consumer.
And one of the things that you had said is you need to look at the service history for that customer.
Yep.
For example, I know for a fact, and some of you listening are going to think, what is wrong with him? I am way overdue on my oil change. Okay. I am, many months past. I am definitely one of those people who falls into the, definitely outside of 6 months, if even 8 to 12 range in terms of getting in for service. So when it comes to people like me, how should a dealer go about determining how long do you wait to see if someone actually defected, or is it just someone who hasn't taken care of it yet?
And that's the key reason why we want to look back those 18 months. Okay. Because we want to understand, are you defecting, or have you not defected? And maybe you just haven't, bit the bullet and finally picked up the phone and made the phone call. Maybe somebody needs to call you and say, hey, Jake, can we get you in for an oil change next week? Oh, well, I'm real busy. I'm running around, or I'm traveling. Whatever excuse you give, it gives them the opportunity to say, well, how can we make it easier on you? Can we come pick up your vehicle? Would it be easier if we had a loaner already set up for you so that it's not an inconvenience? Can we get you a car at Enterprise? Can we arrange an Uber for you? Whatever it may be, it gives them the ability to open that conversation and go into the conversation instead of, what we would traditionally call a cold call, for all intents and purposes, with some type of background knowledge on how to get you back to the dealer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you, I just need a call. Anyone in my area, give me a call and I'll get in there. So
I also want to, you asked me for some stats and I gave you some stats, and I want to be clear that test case, I know there's going to be some dealers on here that listen to this. So the DMS pool that we used was 5 years of sales and 2 years of service. And when I gave you that, roughly 12% from, an independent repair facility, 2 to 4% defect on a sales in any given 30-day window, that is based on a 5-year sales, 2 years of service DMS pool.
One other aspect of this I want to talk about is within the franchise world, what do you see between luxury brands versus traditional brands in terms of defection?
That's kind of all across the board. And I'm going to say it's extremely geographically specific. Okay. So there's not a lot of great independent repair facilities when it comes to your more luxury brands. So they tend to have, not near the attrition or defection that we would see with your, base model domestics and imports. Now, when you get into the areas where there is a good chunk of those independent repair facilities, then we kind of see it about on par. So I think that's more of a geographic anomaly, so to speak, and just where those independent repair facilities that service those luxury brands are versus where they're not. So I'm based in Fort Lauderdale. We have a ton of independent repair facilities for luxury brands. So we see a much higher rate of defection in our local market. But if I go into, some of the more rural and suburban areas, like up in Florida's Panhandle, where there's only maybe 1 or 2 of those independent repair facilities, then, the defection is significantly less.
Well, that's interesting that you see it that way. I was wondering if defection might have been higher in them because service may cost more, right? So
service may cost more, but I also think that there's a lot of those independent repair facilities. I mean, if it's something basic like an oil change, yes. I'm talking more of true, independent repair facilities that would, be doing motor type work, to a luxury vehicle. That's where we see the drop off.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead here and take a quick little break. We're going to go ahead and bring in Liza from the Volie team as per usual. She has something really exciting to share with all of you, something new that we have going on here on our side. And then we'll go ahead and get right back into it with Greg. And one other thing I want to make sure, because I don't know that I mentioned this at the top here for you all, is feel free to put any questions you have for myself or for Greg or even for Liza in the chat here on Zoom, or you can email them to me, jake@volie.com, and we will get to those towards the end of the session here. So make sure that you do that. And of course, you can always reach out after the fact too. But we've got Liza on here now. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Jake. Would you please turn on the screen sharing?
Oh man, did I have a 2-month stretch of remembering to give you screen share? We're back at forgetting.
Perfect. Okay. Here's if anyone has been on the phone with me this week, I've been making jokes about not wanting to steal my own thunder. So drum roll, here's what you've all been waiting for. We just enabled 2-factor authentication within the app. So this is live. You can turn it on within your accounts today. My caveat is please talk with your rep first. We are kind of recommending a rollout plan so that your team has some instructions and so that they have an extra 5 minutes allotted in their day to do the initial setup for 2-factor. So it's just an additional security option that you can enable. I'm going to really quickly walk you through some screenshots. All of this documentation, though, is available to your team. So we're happy to help you get this set up. Enabling it in your account will turn it on for all users. When you do turn it on, it's live at that moment from when you click save. So our recommendation is to do that either in the evening so that everybody can do it when they first log in the morning, or if you're the first one in, just come in before everyone gets there and turn it on in the morning. The first step to the two-factor authentication is an email verification. So whatever email address you use to log into Volie, you'll receive an email that looks something like this, where you'll click on the link to verify through your email first. And then you can choose either to do the two-factor authentication through an authenticator app, or you can use SMS verification. So that's up to you. If you're using an app, they're both really easy to navigate. The app, there's a QR code that you can scan with your app, or there's a key that you can copy paste. I went that route. Once you have verified with your authenticator app, you're going to get a little success message, and then you'll get a handful of what we're calling recovery codes. You'll also get those recovery codes if you go the SMS route. Save those recovery codes. They're only displayed when you do this initial two-factor authentication process. So you only get them once. Save them and store them somewhere safe. So you'll get those at the end of your app verification. SMS looks very similar. You'll type in whatever phone number you want to receive the verification code to each day. They'll send a code to your phone. You plug it in back in your web browser. And then same thing. Once you've clicked verify, you'll get those recovery codes and just save those somewhere safe. So that's it. It's really super simple. We can help you turn it on and help you strategize just as far as what that first day should look like. Make sure that all of your team has screenshots that they can just follow along step by step. But it's really very simple. So let us know if you have any questions or if we can help you get it going. That's all I've got for today.
Awesome. Thanks, Liza. And as usual, you can always reach out to her or your Volie rep if you have any additional questions. One thing I want to clarify, Liza, just to, I know you said it, but just to make sure we say it again, this is live and ready for all users in your Volie account, right?
Yes. Yep. If you enable it, every single person who logs into your Volie account will be required to go through that two-factor process. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Liza. Let's go ahead and
get
back into it with Greg. And there she goes. Okay, perfect. Okay. Let's go ahead and dive back in with a question I had come in here through the Q&A, guys. Don't forget, you can type in the Q&A or you can email them to me at jake@volie.com. But this is kind of related to what we were just talking about, so I want to make sure we touch this here. If somebody defects, how long are you waiting until you touch base with them?
So again, I think that has a lot to do with what defection occurred. Was it a sales defection? Was it a service defection? And what does the historical data say? So if there's something in there, I used Mary as an example earlier. If you're seeing that Mary defects every 4.5 months, and you see that she defected 30 days ago, well, then I would time, in 2.5 months, I would probably start some form of communication with her. Try and hit her between 30 days and 2 weeks of when you know that she's, intending to defect or stands the potential to defect. Now, the medium you use, could be, whatever your choice, whether it be a digital medium, whether or not you activate your BDC or a third-party BDC, an appointment setter, whatever have you. We're not married to whom the vendor is in any way, shape, or form. All we're trying to do is provide the necessary business and market intelligence to give you that timing.
Mm-hmm. And how long would you recommend trying to follow up with these people? What if they don't respond?
Well, I think humans are busy in nature. So if you try once and you don't get an answer, I don't necessarily know that you stop there. I would continue to market to that individual until you saw them defect again. And then maybe you restructure your game plan. Are you delivering the right message? What medium did you use to communicate? Were you able to get them to activate in any way, shape, or form? So if you're using the BDC, if you got hung up on, obviously that might be an indicator. If you're using something like digital or email, did you get click action? Did they come to the website? Did they get to an appointment setter and choose not to make an appointment? I don't think you should just give up. The dealer's already spending those marketing dollars anyway. So maybe it's just a restructuring of your plan of attack, possibly. I'm not saying, keep beating the consumer up, but obviously if you know the cycle, you try one plan of attack to get them back in, and based on responsiveness, I think you move and shift from there.
Mm-hmm. So we have, as you know, a lot of vendors use Volie as well.
Yep.
And can you talk about how call centers in particular can use this data too?
Yeah, so we actually have quite a few call centers. We have, some in-house BDCs and some third-party BDCs. A lot of them are utilizing it for timing in order to reach out to the person at the proper time. For instance, who I bought my vehicle from is a friend of mine. He's also a Volie customer. So they generally market to me 3.5 months before I'm ready for service. Between my travels, between proximity of my residence to my office, based off of their normal practices, they market to me, like, again, 3 to 3.5 months prior to me actually being ready for service. And I always tell them, hey, I'm probably a month or two out, give me a return call. And then they'll call a month or two later and I'll say, I'm still a month or two out. And then from there they actually get me to book a service appointment. So I wouldn't necessarily just give up. Obviously I'm an edge case. I'm friends with that dealership. I don't avoid their phone calls in any way, shape, or form. So that's different. But I guess what I'm saying is just you use the data that's provided in order to make that better decision to market to that individual. I don't really know any different way to put it in words.
I think that's fair. And it comes down to doing what makes sense for your business too. You got to make sure, for example, like Greg said, you can't beat them forever. You got to make sure that you're in compliance with the TCPA for your state. Yep. And, if you're outside of established business relationships, it's just something to keep in mind and make sure that you're in compliance with everything and doing what makes sense for your business. But is there any reason that the data from your tool, from your product, cannot be pushed into Volie so the dealers can call on it in Volie?
No, 100% can. And dealers aren't limited to DMS data or CRM data as well. We have a handful of dealers that have started taking their third-party marketing lists. Okay. Dealers do conquest for service. There's plenty of conquest service companies out there. And they're taking those manifests and they're loading them into the product to say, okay, well, my marketer wants to market to these individuals. And what they want to see is how many of those individuals have serviced in the last 30 days so that they don't have wasted ad spend. That's another way to utilize the tool. And we do allow for it. Obviously, you probably might have to manipulate the data in order for the right format, for the system to take it. But you could load a third-party marketing list in it. I know that you have third-party BDCs as well as third-party marketers on Volie as well. They could be just as much, they could just as much use the tool just as a dealership would.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about the ease of integration with your data?
Yeah. Again, if you're a dealer, we could either pull the data into our system so that you don't have to touch it. Very easy and simple setup. We'll talk to you. We'll figure out what the right polling methodology is. Our standard is 5 years of sales, 2 years of service, but we could do any derivative or variation of that. It's really easy to, or if you have, if you're a vendor, so to speak, and you're already performing polling services and you don't want to pay for them twice, we completely understand that. So we allow you to load the data into our system. We're currently in the process of building out a bunch of, I would say, a whole library suite of bilateral APIs that will allow you to push and pull the data into our system. The process, once you hit go, it takes roughly 2.5 seconds to get a results file. It does not take long at all to process a file. So it is instantaneous as well. So it's a quick way for somebody to go in, get the information, get it back out into their system, and be able to action on it.
Mm-hmm. Greg, I have one final question for you here that I want to touch on before we get to some audience questions. I want to say a couple things here before we move into wrapping up here with this last question. Make sure, if you haven't already, if you're new to Volie or new to watching this on YouTube, check out a lot of the other episodes we've done. We've done many other Volie sessions with some great guests and great information that we've highlighted for you. They're all on our YouTube channel, as well as our weekly Volie rallies that we've started, and definitely want to check those out. So make sure that you like and subscribe here on YouTube. So with that said, again, this was more of a sales pitch type deal than normal, but we really haven't seen anyone doing anything like Greg is doing. But every customer is precious, and like Greg said, you're spending a lot of money to try to get them and to try to keep them. So, Greg, any last minute thoughts here that you want to share with everyone about what you're doing?
We truly do believe it fulfills a need or a gap in the marketplace. Brian Posh has been pushing the need for CDPs, which I completely and utterly stand behind, not only from a data privacy standpoint, data compliance standpoint, a marketing standpoint, but also with all of the additional state privacy laws that are coming out. It used to be, it was just kind of one national law that you had to follow. Then California came into play. Now you have California, you have Nevada, you have Colorado, you have Maine, you have Vermont, you have Virginia. So there's starting to be more and more state laws. And I believe that this kind of fills a large need in that CDP market. And it's conversations I've openly had with people just like Brian Posh, as well as people just like Brian Posh. But I also believe even outside of the CDP market, I know that, dealers look at attrition and sold not serviced, less than 3 years and 3+ years. And obviously there's impact in dealer scoring with that. So, that's our whole premise behind it is, right now they're in the dark, and it's kind of more of a shotgun approach in how to try and, regain those individuals and that market share back. So we want to, give them a little bit better tooling so that they can take more of a sniper approach.
Mm-hmm. And again, we really thought this was very important for all of you to consider how you can find your defectors, because it is, it is pretty tough to find them currently. And we know you're spending a lot of money to get them. So I want to make sure that you can keep them. Let's go ahead and get to some questions here. We've had a few come in from the audience. Greg, for service, do you have any idea what percentage defect to a different franchise dealer compared to a Jiffy Lube type?
Again, I think it's geographical. And I would tell you that I also believe that a lot of that data that we look at over the last 3 years is a little askew, so to speak. Again, just because you have so many individuals that traveled outside of market to acquire vehicles. So I don't know that I have a rock solid stat that I can give you that is a true stat just because of that. Because when we look at, what we've been doing and building traffic alerts since COVID started, which, we're just at about 3 years now, a lot of that data is skewed based off of those results. And I don't want to really put out any bad information. I would tell you that a majority of your service defectors do defect to an independent repair facility rather than a competing dealer.
Question from the same person. Is it easier to reconvert one from another franchise or from the independent?
Again, not trying to dodge questions here, but I still think it's skewed. There's a lot more independent repair facility defectors than there is like-make competing dealer defectors. We have had dealers that have had great success getting them back. Majority in urban markets, though, not in your rural markets. Generally, in your urban markets, your PMAs are smaller, the dealerships are closer together. So it's a little bit easier to defect back to the dealership, almost no matter what the circumstance is. Now, when you get into more of the rural areas, generally what you'll see is where they're defecting is, 40 miles away versus being maybe 7 or 8 miles away. So it's a lot harder. And what you find out is, the individual kind of lives between both dealers, but works closer to the dealer that they're defecting to. And, simply they came and purchased a vehicle due to supply chain issues rather than, an issue with that dealer. So I think it's skewed a little bit on those results.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm not trying to deflect.
No, I think that's a good
and not
point.
answer the question.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So do you mainly look to sell when you market this, is how this question is coming across? Do you mainly sell this for lost sales or lost service business?
Lost service. Lost service and lost collision are probably our two leaders, as it's where a lot of dealers, tend to focus, and both of which can lead to sales. So on the collision side, what we've seen with the dealers who have put a strong focus on it, there's a few different things that go into play. One, you have to have a collision center. But two, it's an immense amount of lost revenue for them. They want to put like-make parts back into that vehicle. But more importantly, generally when a consumer's in an accident, there's a consumer sentiment issue. And with that consumer sentiment issue, and depending on equity position in a vehicle, a consumer will tend to put themselves a little bit further in negative equity than they would, just because they believe there's, a potential bad omen or bad juju, or however you want to put it, on a vehicle that they were just recently in an accident in. Or maybe they just, that was the catalyst for them to make the switch because they want a slightly, they're in a crossover and want to go to a full-size SUV, or maybe they're in a sedan and want to get into a crossover. So the dealer's able to kind of piggyback on that consumer sentiment to try and get them into a vehicle even sooner than that person normally would, and outside of their traditional trade pattern. Mm-hmm. And then obviously on the service side, there still are supply chain issues. Dealers still want to buy vehicles. So focusing on the service, gives them the ability to get the service, gives them a potential chance to make an acquisition on a vehicle, and, and then on top of that, also sell a vehicle. Mm-hmm. So, that side kind of drives all sides, which is why we have seen the focus there. That doesn't necessarily mean that, there's not a focus on the sales side. We've just had much more success selling the potentials of, capturing those service defectors, and helping the dealer understand why they're defecting and how to, put that better next best message in front of that consumer.
Has there been a shift in terms of defection with the onset of stronger prepaid maintenance programs from the OEM, for example, pre and post Toyota Care?
I don't know that we've looked at it necessarily that in depth for me to give you an answer. So I mean, I can tell you there's a ton of new vehicle acquisitions that are defecting. But again, are they defecting because they're buying out of PMA is probably going to skew that a bit.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that in terms of targeting defectors, does why buy marketing work better, or being more aggressive with your offers for inactive customers?
So it depends on where they're defecting to. If they're defecting to a lube facility, our clients have had a lot more success with that why buy and going the informative informational route. When they've been defecting to John's Auto Repair, they've had more success being aggressive. So I think it's where the defection occurs that's really going to be the catalyst that tells you which direction you should go on that.
Awesome. One final question for you today. So, Greg, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, how can they reach you?
You can email me, you can call me. So you can email me. It's gashe at m1-data.com. You can also email service@m1-data.com. Any of our customer service reps would be more than happy to speak with you. I'm more than happy to get you any literature, one-pagers, marketing documentation, and give you a demo of the platform so that you can see it for yourself, see how it works, what your abilities are and aren't within the platform. You could give us a call. Phone number is 855-776-1195. Again, that's 855-776-1195.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to be on here with all of us. A lot of great information about not only what you do, but it's some great information for folks to think about who haven't really thought about customer defection before. So definitely appreciate the time, and appreciate the time of everyone being here with us today. And I hope you all have a fantastic day.
Hope everybody has a great day. Thanks for having me.